Hi everyone and welcome back. My name is Dina D'Alessandro, registered dietitian, nutritionist, founder and chief executive life changer at DishWithDina. I've helped hundreds of patients and clients over the past few years meet their health and wellness goals, and I'm so glad to have you join us again here on week 3 of Gaining Kitchen Confidence, the first program in our 4-week fast track series. Hopefully by now you're getting into the swing of things or are taking some time to catch up on week 1 and 2 video assignments and are enjoying the interaction that you're getting either here in the YouTube community or over in our Facebook private group. Remember to like and subscribe and share this video with others. Leave a comment below with any feedback. Ask questions as you wish. And remember that our Gaining Kitchen Confidence program, there are 4 objectives that we're hoping that you learn to do with us in the course of the next 4 weeks or the 28 days that you're with us. We hope that you become a savvier supermarket shopper, that you understand how to read those nutrition facts labels on the back of food packages, that you learn how to create weekly meal plans that work within your budget and schedule, and that you do engage and interact with a community of like-minded people like yourself who are looking to embrace and develop new relationships with food. Week 3 is all about gaining an overall mindfulness for your kitchen, your supermarket, wherever you go grocery shopping, your eating habits. It's also about involving some of your senses like taste and touch and sight. Like last week's video, there is a lot of information in here, so we've decided to split this one into 2 parts as well so that you can watch it in installments at your convenience. The materials that you'll need to refer to and download are, as always, linked below. You've already been using your activity log, and you should have your goal agreement sheet as well from the past couple of weeks, so be sure to keep those on hand and update those accordingly. And remember to be specific with making your goals. Some examples can be to include a healthy protein with breakfast to keep you fuller longer, or switch out a white bread for whole grain bread anytime that you have a sandwich. Or it could be, make dinner 2 times a week. That's it, simple as that. The Dish with Dina philosophies are what's guiding today's instructions, but we realize that some things might not yet apply to you. So if that's the case, especially since we're bombarding you with a ton of information today, feel free just to pick and choose whatever speaks to you, or things that have been kind of like in the back of your mind that you want to focus on, and then you can create those into your next short-term goals. Then if you rewatch this at a later date, maybe those other things kind of that you've glossed over kind of bubble up to the top and become more prevalent for you at that time, the next time around. So our first philosophy is to encourage you to cook at home more often. This assumes that you know how to cook already, or at least you know the basics of cooking. As we mentioned previously, we're not teaching cooking skills in these videos. We're just giving you some basic guidance as to how to cook, prep, and plan efficiently. So if you need cooking guidance, this is YouTube, so there's tons and plenty of tutorials out there that can be found online in general on YouTube, or just do a search. But we've actually linked some of our favorites below for you if you'd like to scan through some of those. The reason we encourage you to cook at home, or at least eat out less often, I guess. Most restaurant meals or takeout foods, grocery prepared items as well, sometimes can be quite high in fat, sugar, or salt. So when you're cooking or preparing meals, or at least some ingredients at home, this can help you control what goes into your meals and your body. And then, of course, you can better manage your health in general. Cooking does not have to be incredibly time consuming or an elaborate production. If you have some basic tools and equipment in your kitchen already, you can get a lot done or accomplished in a very short amount of time if you are efficient in doing it, and following these guidelines hopefully will get you there. Or you might want to invest in something like a crock pot or a pressure cooker where you can be even more efficient in your kitchen. So you just kind of set everything up before you leave for the day, turn that thing on, and when you come home, your recipes are ready for you. So we've also linked below some of our recommended staple items to have on hand in your kitchen. Because I live in New York City, while there are plenty of supermarkets around within walking distance from where I live, I just can't carry everything that I need to bring with me home on any given day. I schlep a lot of stuff around with me. I'm kind of like a traveling dietitian. So what I do is I carve out a budget for myself every week, and I actually order through a delivery service to have my groceries delivered to me. So I purchase my produce, general ingredients like spices and groceries and other things like toilet paper and paper towels online. This way it's more convenient for me. So that's my life and that's how I work. In your case, you might want to actually go out and do grocery shopping and pick and choose and smell and touch all of the things that you're going to be bringing home with you. But my point was that while these things are being delivered to me on the day that they're being delivered, what I do is I clean out my fridge, clean up my kitchen, and I get ready to meal prep. I carve out a good few hours. Don't get me wrong. This can be a little time consuming if you're like me, especially, which I'll show you in a second. My kitchen is quite tiny, so I kind of have to move things around while I'm working on one thing, clean, wash, dry, and then work on something else. But this is what I do. Like usually every Saturday or Sunday, I'll carve out a few hours and just kind of get done as much as I possibly can. So as I said, if you haven't already seen a picture of my kitchen on any of my social media pages, here it is. It is tiny. And however, when I do my weekly meal prep, it actually looks a little bit more like this. Some of my standbys that I use in my meal preparations are things like mason jar salads, right? So this is where you have some sort of receptacle. In my case, it's a mason jar, a glass jar with a lid. It's airtight. And then you layer your ingredients. You put the heartier ingredients on the bottom. You actually put your dressing down there as well, so it kind of sits at the very bottom and it doesn't combine just yet with all of the other ingredients. And then you layer everything on top of it with the leafier or more delicate ingredients at the very, very top. Close that off and it's good for a few days or even longer depending on how airtight your jar is. I also do salad dressings. I make these from home. I do not spend money on making something like oil and vinegar mixes. I find that I can put together some really interesting flavor profiles. Sometimes I'll use things like paprika and cumin, and I'll have kind of like that Mediterranean Moroccan feel. Other times I might do like an Italian inspired seasonings in there like oregano and basil. So these, when I put these together, again in an airtight jar, that can last months in my refrigerator. I also do every week, I hard boil at least half a dozen eggs. So as you can see on this picture here, I write the dates on mine just in case I use a carton that has like half raw eggs and half hard-boiled eggs. I want to make sure I'm eating the right ones. Those two can last about a week in the refrigerator. My next go-to item, absolutely without a doubt, every few days I'm doing smoothies. I love smoothies. So I usually will put in a mix of leafy greens. I'm not a big fan of kale actually, so I'll do like baby spinach or baby greens of some sort. I'll either throw in some berries or whatever might be, say, seasonal at the time or frozen to add a little flavor. So again, that might be strawberries or frozen strawberries, or it might be a half of a banana. I'll also add in some nuts or some peanut butter or some seeds. That actually adds both like a healthy plant-based protein and a healthy fat component, or I can just go with like a half of an avocado and that would give me the healthy fat that I need in there. And that helps kind of last a little bit longer. This way it's not just the leafy greens and the berries floating around in there. The protein or the fat actually helps keep me fuller longer. So I bottle those up in another container or a thermos, stick them in the fridge. I will say I don't usually advise on making too big a batch of this because within a few days they're going to ferment a little bit and they'll get like a little tangy and that might not be super pleasing to you. The next thing too, so if I'm making something like a one pot or one pan meal like this quiche or a lentil chili, or this packet of broiled veggies that I kind of did in this little packet here, I'll cook everything up in one batch, right? So that's one meal altogether. And then I'll divide that up into portions and then store it into the refrigerator or the freezer and just grab and go and heat and eat on the days that I want to use those things. I will say I don't always want to eat the same thing every single day. So, and there's also only 2 of us in my household. So sometimes I'll make ingredients and then store them in separate containers. This way, when I'm ready to eat, I'm just pulling out like different containers and mixing and matching whatever I want for that particular meal. So for example, this photo here, this is a pan of roasted tomatoes, which were kept in a separate container in my fridge and then added to whatever I made that week. So I used it often in different recipes, like this simple but impressive deconstructed grilled Caesar salad. But remember, even if you don't cook or you don't have time to cook, you can easily prepare foods to take with you, or like I said before, you can mix and match these things at home as well. Things like cut fruit, string cheese, chopped vegetables, hummus, avocado guacamole containers, pistachios or other nuts. Those are really great to just have on hand, grab on go, eat in between meals as snacks, or combine them in a way that makes a meal for you. Our second philosophy is to eat the rainbow. So you might have heard this before, and this is assuming that you like fruits and vegetables. That's where we get a lot of our color from, but we're not forcing you to eat anything that you do not like. If you don't like broccoli, I don't like kale, like I said. If you don't like broccoli, you hate broccoli, don't eat it. We're leaving it up to you to find something that you can eat, that you enjoy, that you want to incorporate regularly into recipes for just added health benefits. So my suggestion here could be making this a goal of yours. Pick and choose, like, one different fruit or one different vegetable each week to try out, especially when they're in season, which we'll talk about a little bit later. For the most part, the more the better when it comes to vibrantly colored plant foods, along with the nutrients and vitamins that they contain. They also have the color that is given in the plant actually corresponds in some way with a compound that supports your health. These are known as phytonutrients and also antioxidants. So you might have heard of both of those things. What they do is they help prevent or slow damage to your cells. They help protect you. So by the way, yes, there's always such a thing as overdoing it, even when it comes to fruits and veggies. For example, if you pile mounds and mounds of sweet corn on your plate, or you have nothing but like mango smoothies for an entire week for breakfast every morning, while those items are very healthy and great on their own, you may unwillingly consume excess amounts of calories here without realizing it, because these foods are kind of high in natural sugars than some other foods. And we'll save that discussion for a different program. So my suggestion here is that it's always best just to have as much variety as possible in every meal over the course of a day or a week. So some of these other things that I'm showing you here is just to encourage you that, every time you look down at your plate, whether it's a snack or a main meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, try to have as many variety of colors and textures, not just like 4 tan blobs. Now, granted, maybe everything does share the same color component and they're all really healthy for you, and that's totally fine. But the point is, see if you can kind of bring some other things in, because as I mentioned, each one of those foods that are a different color give you a different vitamin, nutrition, nutrient in some way that another food might not, or they complement each other. Not only will you know that you're getting as many nutrients and vitamins as you possibly can, but this is also a great visual guide to help you gauge how many servings and how many food groups you're getting in each meal and throughout the day. And you had a food group checklist that we talked about that we'll talk about again, and this is a great thing that you can keep in mind for that. If you follow along our Dish with Dina social media pages, you will see lots of pictures like these that we hope inspire you to create or select similar ones at home or when you eat out. Speaking of food groups, let's go back for a sec and look at that original My Plate graphic that I shared with you last week. This replaced an older version of what used to be called the food pyramid. I actually find this one a lot more consumer friendly, user friendly. It's visually impactful. It looks like a plate, so you're looking down and you can kind of recognize the food groups in their suggested portions or ratios. And if you're focusing on bringing in more plant-based foods into your diet, as it is, almost everything listed on here except for dairy can come from plants. But interestingly enough, that said, we actually prefer this healthy eating plate over the My Plate graphic because it has a couple of different components on there. So it takes into account healthy fats or oils that you can get from obviously things like olive oil, but you can also get healthy fats from fish, nuts, seeds, and avocados. Not necessarily in like the oil dressing component, but you can get healthy fats in there. And you also get different components of that too that meets the requirement of having a protein with a fish or having a plant-based protein and a plant-based fat with nuts. Avocado gives you some good fiber and some good fat as well. And we like the ratios of the food groups here a little bit better as well. It also adds in water and other lifestyle components, which we'll address in next week's video. So I want to be clear about something here because I don't want to come off feeling too elitist with all my plant-based discussions. There's definitely healthy and less healthy foods out there. It's just about creating a balance that works for you. So if you've ever been to one of my live presentations, I always post these slides up that say, as a registered dietitian, I definitely mostly eat things like this, but I also eat things like this and this. By focusing on nourishing my body first, I can then go off and enjoy more what would be considered, I guess, indulgent foods whenever I want to, because I know that I'm prioritizing healthful eating habits first. Our next philosophy is to increase the percentage of natural whole foods that you eat and also decrease the amount of processed foods. Now, processed foods can be anything from cereals, pasteurized milk, breads, cold cuts, pastries, microwavable meals, but realize that not all processed foods are necessarily unhealthy. Processing just means that the manufacturer has taken the food out of its natural state and done something else to it. However, many processed foods can very well contain added preservatives and sweeteners and colorings. The stuff that's added may or may not be a cause for concern for you, but I definitely want to focus on the stuff that's been taken away. So if something's taken out, like an essential nutrient, vitamin, mineral, whatever, sometimes processing will actually do that and remove the nutrients from a food that's designed by nature to protect you in some way. These things can be mechanically added back in. So sometimes you'll see a word on the packaging that says enriched or fortified, meaning that the product is now complete in that way, but maybe it's not. So it might be difficult then to get that same naturally potent goodness from the things like fiber, antioxidants, once that they've been stripped away from the food during the processing. And as I mentioned last week, we understand that everyone's schedule and lifestyle might not necessarily allow them to have the ability or flexibility in only eating whole foods. So if this is the case for you, then just choose packaged foods that are as minimally processed as possible. And you can go back to the last video where we show you kind of how to read the ingredients and the food label there. So for example, I have store-bought packaged ingredients in each of these dishes that you see here, but the rest of the ingredients in the meal are in their whole form. Using peanut butter, one of my favorites, right, as another example of a minimally processed food. So if you're purchasing peanut butter in a jar, it should contain one ingredient, like peanuts. That's it, roasted peanuts, and okay, like maybe a pinch of salt, but that's it. Peanuts make their own oil. They have their own healthy fat in them, so there's no need for extra oil to be added to it. And sugar too. I mean, a lot of these components are kind of unnecessary, and they don't necessarily also allow you to be in control of what you're putting into your body. They're also done for cost effectiveness too. So things that are more whole are going to be a little bit pricier than something that's kind of cut with sugar and fat to add to that, volume. Ice cream too, which is another thing, another food that I like to talk about a lot. Obviously it's a processed food, right? It should have maybe no more than, say, 5 ingredients. And it should be recognizable. So we're talking like cream, nuts, sugar, of course, to make it sweet, flavoring of some kind, and that's pretty much it. You don't need a whole laundry list of things in your sweet treats or in your indulgent foods. They should still be somewhat recognizable to you. If you do have to get most of your foods from packages or prepared outside meals, just do your best to kind of know what's inside of them before making your purchase. Read your labels. I mean, especially if you have an allergy or an intolerance, you're going to want to know what's in something. So you can read your labels, or you can ask the server at the deli counter, the restaurant server, how the food is prepared. You can look up information online for chain restaurants, especially. I believe if they have more than, say, 20 locations as a chain restaurant, they're kind of mandated by law, at least in the United States, that they have to have their nutrition information posted visibly somewhere in their restaurant location or online. So at least you can see there's nutrition information available for you there. And keep in mind too that with proper planning, it doesn't cost a lot to eat well. You can definitely work within whatever budget. I believe we're not talking about only eating organic foods or constantly seeking out like artisanal grass-fed beef at any time. I'm talking about eggs, lentils, beans, frozen vegetables, frozen fruit. These are some of the cheapest and most nutrient-dense foods that you can find. So, use that and check your supermarket flyers. Use coupons. Go for weekly sales. See what's on sale. See what you can get that's affordable, and then maybe you can freeze it, make it and freeze it, and keep that on hand for future meals. Okay, we're going to stop here. That's the wrap up for part 1 of this 2-parter for week 3 of our Gaining Kitchen Confidence program. When you are done watching this, take a breath, go for a snack, and then come back and watch the second half with us. We'll be waiting for you there.